Hello folks, this is the Arizona Child Support Calculator. This is a very simple calculator where you plug in your incomes and some information about you and your ex-spouse and the child you have together, and this will tell you what kind of child support both of you owe and who owes whom what kind of child support. You enter in a lot of the basic information first, some of the basic information first, and then you enter some more information like how much money do you spend on daycare, how much money do you spend on medical insurance, and a bunch of other things. It takes all that into account and then computes a spreadsheet that you can attach to your court papers in your petition to modify child support, or if you're responding to petition to modify child support. This is the Arizona government website, and they have, I'll post the link to this URL here, and based on that, you can also follow this. So let's look at the which calculator here. And it lists a bunch of calculators. And let's just click on the 2018 to 2020 support calculator. This opens up the calculator for this year, and this is where you enter a bunch of information. Before you see this information being entered, I highly suggest you go watch this other video I have, which explains why we need to enter this information. What does the calculator do with the incomes we enter here? What does the calculator do with the children's ages that we enter here? And what exactly is the combined income used for? And why does it matter which parent earns how much? It is a very good idea to understand these concepts, because otherwise you'll just see numbers and you'll see a final result and you might not know what is really going on. If you really want to understand how this works, I suggest you watch that video, and I've put a link to that video right about here in this video. So assuming you've watched that, or assuming you understand how that works, let's proceed. The year is 2020, and prepared by petitioner respondent. Say you are the petitioner and you are filling this out, let's just say. And let's just say you are the dad, so John Smith, and you are the dad, John Smith, and you can enter your case number and other information here. Respondent, which would be your ex-wife, and her name is maybe Mary Smith. And we enter the applicable time sharing arrangement from the drop down box below, which means that we basically say that the child lives with a certain parent most of the time. Let's just assume that the child lives with the respondent most of the time, with the mother. Let's just say, for the sake of this example, let's enter the name of the child. Maybe it's Brad Smith, and their date of birth is, maybe they were born on 1st of January of 2009, and it computes their age, his age, to be 1171, so 11.71 years old. Now let's assume that we have, you have only one child together. So just to keep things simple, the presumptive termination date has been entered automatically. By default, the child support obligation on a child ends when they turn 18. So this date, if you see, is actually the last date of the month in which this child will turn 18. So that's when it is assumed that the child will no longer require the support of the parents. In some cases, that is not true. If the actual termination date is going to be before or after, or for whatever reason, if you believe that this date should be different and you're ready and prepared to present the evidence in front of the judge that shows that this date should be different, or this date is different, then you enter that here. Otherwise, you leave it blank at the presumptive termination date. The termination date basically says the termination of this court order that we're about to prepare now. The youngest grade estimated is 6. Based on the age, it estimated the grade. If the grade is actually different, you may enter it here. It has calculated number of minor children. Under 12 is basically 1, because our child is only 11.71, so not quite 12 yet. Income. As I said before, if you have watched that video, you understand why we're entering these incomes and what the calculator is going to do with it. Let's just say, since the petitioner is the father and the respondent is the mother, in this case, in this example, let's say the father earns $5,000 a month and the mother earns $4,000 a month. And is either of you paying spousal maintenance to anybody or receiving spousal maintenance from anybody? That information can be entered here, but let's leave that out for this example to just keep it simple. Now this says, is custodial parent to other children subject of court orders, which basically that means is the petitioner parent to another child, which is also subject to court orders, or if is the respondents the parent to another child that is subject to court orders, which means somebody other than our boy here. In this case, let's just say the two of you have only this one boy. The court ordered child support paid for children of other relationships. So since we don't have, since you don't have children of other relationship, that's 0. Other natural or adopted children not subject of court orders. If that is true, you can select that number here. Alternate deduction only if less than standard. This basically says that if you have a reason to believe that there should be an alternate deduction and not take the standard deduction, then enter it here. Now there are these question marks above everything, right? Next to everything. So you can hover over it and it just shows you the a little bit of a description of what this is about. So if you ever wonder what these options are, you can always take a look at that. Now basically, you've entered your incomes, and based on that, it has computed the total income, which is very important, which is basically the total income that is going to now be used to determine the standard of living that the child deserves. If this number was significantly higher or significantly lower, then the court would have determined that this child deserves a different standard of living. Of course, if the parents were together, they would have raised this child together with that kind of income, or whatever the income would have been at that time. Now, since the parents are separated, the child should not suffer. That's what the court believes. The court believes that it's not the child's fault, and the child should be able to live the same standard of living as they would have been living if the parents were together. And so based on that, what the court does is takes both the incomes and puts them together and says, this is the income that really matters for the upbringing of the child. Based on this income, it then calculates, based on the age of the child, what is the estimated monthly expense that is expected to incur for this child. So to raise this child for just the basic things like food, shelter, basic education, toys, clothing, some of the birthday parties, and vacation once in a while, just the basic living expenses for parents who earn a total of $9,000 a month gross income, the basic expectation is $1,111 to be spent on a child who is a minor, who's under 12 basically years of age. Now there is an adjustment for over 12, and you can take the if our child was over 12, then this would have shown, but since the child is not over 12, it just says there's nothing applicable here. But you can change this number to another number if you believe that is true. Now for everything that you change here from the default, you have to be prepared to explain to the judge why you're changing it, or why is a change necessary. In your case, why do you want to change from the default? So if you change anything, be prepared to answer to the judge why that change is necessary. Medical, dental, and vision insurance paid. So if the child is included in either parent's insurance, and if that parent has to pay additional to put the child on their insurance, which is most likely the case, then then you enter that here, because that becomes an expense on the child, right? Over and above this basic living expense, the insurance is not seen as basic living expense. It is seen as something over and above. So say, for example, the father really includes the child on his insurance, and that makes him pay an additional $20 a month for insurance. Suppose the employer gives him the option to include a minor child in an insurance for an additional $20 a month, and that probably gets deducted from his paycheck every month. And since the father has included the child, the mother does not need to, so it's zero for the mother. It'll automatically deduct the federal tax if it is higher than a certain number, and we'll see that in a few minutes. Extra education expenses paid. I'm sorry, I put this in the wrong row. So this should be here. This is medical, dental, and vision insurance paid for monthly childcare costs. Now, the child is going to school presumably, and when the child comes back from school in the mid-afternoon, since both parents are working, there's no parent at home, right? So since the child lives primarily with the mother, maybe the mother has hired a nanny who takes care of the child when the child gets back from school at home, or maybe the mother has enrolled the child in the school's aftercare program, and the mother spends say $200 a month for this aftercare for the child to be taken care of and looked after until she comes back home, or she's available to look after him again. Now, since the mother has already, she's already paying this amount, the father does not have to pay anything additional, right? So based on that, it shows you that the federal tax credit allowed to custodian is $50. So she can take this federal tax credit. So basically, essentially, she spent only $150 a month for daycare expenses. Extra education expenses paid and extraordinary gifted or handicapped expenses paid. Let's just keep that at zero for now for this example. Of course, feel free to enter this if they apply to in your case. Now, here's the important thing. 1281 becomes the total child support obligation, which is, of course, you take this amount, which is the basic necessary amount, and then you say, okay, we need an additional $20 for insurance, an additional $200 for childcare. You all put all that together here, comes out to be 1281. That is the total child support obligation, including the medical and the daycare and other expenses you would have put here. Since the total income, 9,000, is made up of 5,000 from the father and 4,000 from the mother, what is done is that is used to compute the income ratio. So out of the 9,000, 55.56% is coming from the father and 44.44% is coming from the mother. When I say coming, it's not really coming from everybody. It's just that the 9,000 is made up of 5,000 and 4,000, and father earns 55.56% of the total combined income, and the mother earns 44.44%. Using this ratio, as I explained in the other video I was talking about, using this ratio, the father's obligation is computed to be 55.56% of this total child support obligation, and the mother's is computed to be 44.4% of this total child support obligation. Now let's proceed. There's a parenting time cost adjustment. Again, these are adjustments based on your specific scenarios. And as I said before, there's a question mark here. You can take a look and understand exactly what this means. Basically, this is just says that, if a parent spends a certain significant amount of time with the child, then it is expected that the parent, if it's a non-custodial parent that spends a significant amount of time with the child, then it is expected that the non-custodial parent will be making some expenses for the child, making some living expenses for the child. So we can give them credit for that. If that is the case, then you enter that here. Of course, then you have to prove to the judge why that is the case. But feel free to enter that here if that is the case for you. And based on this, what it does is gives each parent credit for what they've already paid. So the father's obligation is $711.67. That includes the additional $20 for insurance and $200 for childcare. This is the father's obligation. Now, since the father, out of his obligation, he's directly paying $20 to the insurance, he gets a credit for that. So his obligation reduces by 20, comes down to be 691.67. Similarly, the mother's obligation is 569. Since she is paying $150 to daycare, remember $150 is arrived by taking what she actually pays and subtracting, subtracting the income tax, the federal tax credit. So essentially, she's paying $150 out of her pocket. So she gets a credit for $150, and that subtracts, that lowers the amount to $419.33. That's the mother's obligation. Now, here's some self-support reserve test for petitioner. Basically, you can read more about it, but basically this just says each parent is allowed a self-support reserve, and if based on the incomes and the expenses, that goes to a point where raising the child is no longer affordable because it encroaches into their own self-support for what they need to raise themselves, essentially, or live for themselves. Then certain things can be adjusted. In this case, that is not the case. Both parents are comfortable, so this doesn't apply. Now, what this tells is the mother's part of the obligation, after giving her all the credits and adding up all the expenses, is $419, and the father's is $692. Since the child lives primarily with the mother, it is expected that the mother is paying all the expenses, is the basic living expenses and all that stuff, after having deducted whatever else, which means that the mother, whose obligation is only $419, she's actually paying for the both of them. So therefore, the father needs to reimburse the mother for his share. So it's, in this case, his share is $692. And you will see this difference is not in this ratio, right? This is not 55 to 44. This is 55 to 44. This is a much larger gap because the mother, out of her pocket, has paid this $150, or effectively $150. So there we go. We have this 692, and this is what the father is supposed to pay to the mother every month in child support. Let's see how this can be modified a little bit, right? So let's see if let's change something, right? So for example, if we say that the insurance is not really on the father, the insurance is probably paid by the mother, let's see, and the mother's employer makes her pay $25 for insurance, and the father says, well, you know what, I'm going to take care of paying the nanny. So the father says, I'm going to pay for a nanny, and the father says, I'm going to pay $200 directly to the nanny, and that's what he does. Now see what happens. Now this number changes a little bit because we changed the numbers a little bit, and the father does not get credit because now his income is different, right? And he's also not the custodial parent. So these numbers work a little differently. But this is the total obligation. And again, it is split in the same ratio. The incomes of the parents are still the same. No matter what spending they did, the incomes are still the same. So the ratio is still the same. So the father's obligation is $742. The mother's obligation becomes $593. And the father gets credit for the $200 he paid directly. So his obligation reduces to $542. And the mother gets credit, and her obligation reduces to $569 effectively. So basically, the father's obligation is now $542. This is the remaining amount that he's supposed to send over to the mother. He can send it over as a check. He can do a wage garnishing from his employer, or whatever other arrangements work for them, or one that the court has ordered. Once we have entered all this information here, you click on the print worksheet, and when you click on the print worksheet, it will basically produce a worksheet for you. And let me show you how that works. And basically, here's your child support calculator .pdf. And here we are. This is the child support calculator. So let's, we don't want that. So let's look at that. The petitioner John Smith, respondent Mary Smith, lives mostly with respondent. The child's name is this, age is 11.71. It filled out all the information for us that we had entered here, 5,000, 4,000, and the 1111 figure. If you remember, we had entered that the mother pays $25 for insurance, the father pays $200 for daycare and aftercare expenses. Based on that, all those calculations we talked about, and here's the final number. Child support obligation to be paid by petitioner. And so basically this says this is for educational purposes only, does not constitute legal advice. The amount of child support may be different from the amount estimated. Of course, the court has final authority. So basically, this is something you are preparing to attach to your papers and presenting to your judge, and the judge will then decide, whether what you entered here is accurate and should be ordered. Normally, what happens is if both parents cannot agree on the numbers, they can submit their own versions of this PDF, and the judge will then decide, whose child support worksheet makes more sense, or whose proposal makes more sense, or maybe something completely different makes more sense. So this is the Arizona child support calculator. Very simple, very easy to understand, very easy to fill in calculator. I hope this has been helpful. If it has, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, because I keep coming up with these videos to help you navigate family courts by yourself. It is always a good idea to consult with an attorney, but if you want to do it by yourself, there are many tools for you to do it. This is one of them, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.